Hey, if you're like me, every time you find yourself in the market for a replacement battery for your power tools, you're faced with the kind of uncertain choice as to whether or not it's worth spending twice as much money on the name brand OEM battery or saving a bunch of cash by buying a cheap knockoff like this guy right here. Now in my case, I happen to be fairly well locked into the Ryobi 18 volt ecosystem, mostly because as a DIYer, I'm not really needing to rely on these tools to make a living as a professional tradesman, so I kind of made the decision years ago to save a bunch of money and just kind of skip the more expensive DeWalt and Milwaukee power tools in favor of the much more budget-friendly Ryobi power tool ecosystem. And even though they are definitely far less expensive than their more professionally targeted competition, the fact remains that when you're buying batteries for these things, there's still a huge price difference between the Ryobi OEM batteries and the hundreds of various knockoff battery options that you'll find on Amazon. So for this video, I decided to go and buy one of the most highly rated knockoff Ryobi battery options, which was this guy right here on Amazon, and put them to the test to see how they measure up to a Ryobi branded OEM battery, and that these things claim to be a direct replacement for. So based on a 4.4 star rating, I ended up buying a 2-pack of these 3 amp hour replacement batteries from a brand called Alot, I think, for a surprisingly low price of just $30.55 for the pair. Now combine that to this Ryobi branded 2 amp hour 2-pack for almost twice that price at $56.87. But I did put that 3 amp hour capacity rating on these knockoff batteries in air quotes because, as you can see, the size difference between these supposed 3 amp hour batteries and the OEM 2 amp hour battery is pretty negligible. In fact, I think there's probably less than maybe a 1/4 of an inch height difference between the two. And I did also weigh them since they don't really seem any heavier in the hand. And despite the specified capacity being a supposed 50% greater on these knockoff batteries, they actually weigh in at about 1 ounce lighter than the Ryobi battery. But, you know, I'm sure they wouldn't lie about that, so it must be true, right?
Right.
Seriously though, even though it seems obvious to me that these can't possibly be 3 amp hour batteries, if they can actually provide the same runtime or maybe even a little bit better than the Ryobi branded batteries for approximately half the cost, well, it might be worth considering. So I just got this Ryobi 2 amp hour battery as part of a bundle with the new Ryobi high performance barrel grip jigsaw that I just bought recently, and I absolutely love that thing. It's definitely one of the best Ryobi tools that I've ever owned. And I decided to set this battery aside and not use it yet so I could use it in a fair head-to-head test with these 2 knockoff batteries. So these batteries are all brand new and they do not have any charge cycles on them yet. All right, so the first test that we're gonna do, I've charged these all up to 100% with the same Ryobi charger, and then I just let them sit on the counter in my cold garage for a couple of weeks to see if they all retain, you know, similar charge and runtime under normal circumstances where you would just charge them up and maybe just let the batteries sit a while before you actually go out and use them. And I'll test them all with the same drill, this guy here, kind of an inexpensive Ryobi drill, even more inexpensive than some of their other ones. And I've got the trigger clamped all the way down so they'll all be under exactly the same load when I run the test. And I'll monitor each test with the time-lapse camera using this little piece of white tape here so I have an easy visual indicator of exactly when the drill stops running. And I'll do a follow-up test where I charge each battery and then immediately perform the runtime test right after it comes off the charger so it doesn't have any idle time, and then we'll see how they compare under those circumstances as well. All right, so let's jump into that first test and take a look and see how these guys compare after a couple weeks of idle time in that cold garage after being charged up to 100%. All right, now I've got the Ryobi branded battery on the left side and the 2 knockoff batteries in the middle and the right side. I'll call them knockoff 1 and knockoff 2. You can see that the Ryobi battery here did actually have the shortest runtime of the 3, lasting just under 46 minutes. Knockoff number 1 lasted exactly 4 minutes longer at just under 50 minutes runtime, followed by knockoff number 2 that had the best runtime in this test at 51.5 minutes, or about 5.5 minutes longer than the Ryobi OEM battery. Now, just based on this result alone, it's pretty clear that these 2 knockoff batteries are definitely not the 3 amp hour capacity that they're marketed as. But we kind of already knew that was likely the case just given the weight differences. But I must admit that I was a little surprised that both of these knockoffs did manage to provide about 10% more runtime than the Ryobi OEM battery. And that's obviously not 50% more than they claim, but at about half the cost, The fact that they provided any additional runtime advantage is kind of interesting all by itself. Okay, so that was after sitting in the cold idle for 2 weeks after being fully charged. Let's see how they compare when we run the exact same test on them immediately after they come off the charger. All right, so once again, just like the first test, we do notice that the Ryobi dies first with a runtime of 50 minutes and 14 seconds. But the two knockoff batteries only managed to provide slightly more runtime in this test, with the knockoff number 2 giving it up after only an additional 27 seconds versus the Ryobi, and knockoff number 1 giving us about 53 seconds more than the Ryobi. So in this test, where we put them under constant load immediately after coming off the charger, their actual runtime performance results were actually pretty close. Now, what's interesting to me is that when you compare each battery's performance to itself on the two test conditions, it seems clear that the Ryobi branded battery actually doesn't seem to retain its charge as well over that 2-week period as the two knockoff batteries do. Now, I can't really be certain why that is, but it might be that the Ryobi batteries are designed with a small discharge over time to prevent them from sitting long periods at 100% state of charge, which with lithium-ion battery chemistry is known to kind of accelerate their natural capacity degradation over time, resulting in a shorter overall service life. Now again, I can't be sure that's what's going on here, but I do know that other battery manufacturers like Ego Power and DJI drone batteries, for example, do design this kind of behavior into their batteries as a form of battery conditioning in an effort to provide the longest overall service life. All right, let's test these batteries in more of a kind of a high torque application. So got this very small Ryobi saw here, circular saw, and I've got the Ryobi branded OEM battery on there right now. So let's try a 2x4 first and just see if the OEM battery cuts the 2x4 just fine. All right, not exactly a sharp blade on this saw, but the OEM battery did get through this 2x4. Like I said, this is a super small, slightly better than a toy. All right, let's try it with one of these generic batteries here. All right, basically the same result. Let's try the other battery. All right, generic battery number 2. All right, so no difference in this kind of pushing this particular small saw to the limit on this 2x4. But I think the important thing is that there doesn't seem to be any difference in how the saw performs with the OEM battery versus how it performs with the generic batteries. All right, let's try something slightly more suitable for this saw. This is just basically 1 inch by, 8-inch white pine. And this is the generic battery, or one of the generic batteries. So let's see how it does on this. As expected, not really a problem. Let's try the other generic battery just to see if there's any variance in how they behave. No problem with that generic. Now let's try the Ryobi OEM battery. All right, pretty much the same. All right, so as far as I can tell, from a performance standpoint, these OEM batteries perform exactly the same as the generic knockoff. So there's not an advantage to one or the other in terms of the little bit higher performance current draw required for this little saw. Okay, so what conclusions might we draw here? Well, for starters, if you're considering knockoff batteries that appear to be the same size as their OEM counterparts, but they claim 50% more capacity, it's probably bull. And you should understand that before buying them. And this does seem to be a common marketing practice for many of these knockoff batteries. And I've definitely seen this with knockoff Ego Power 56-volt batteries as well. So how will these knockoff batteries perform over time in comparison to the OEM original Ryobi batteries? That's going to be pretty hard to know for sure, since there are many variables that are going to impact a battery's long-term service life. And it might be impractical, if not impossible, to do a long-term real-world test and keep everything exactly the same to guarantee that you're actually doing a fair comparison. Now that said, I think if you're a fairly casual user of your power tools like I am, where you often go weeks or maybe even sometimes months between usage, it may be hard to justify spending twice as much on a name brand battery. But if you do decide to save some cash and buy these knockoffs, you might want to take a little extra care and try not to leave them on the charger once they're done charging. And in general, try not to store them for long periods of time at a full state of charge, since those are things that are well known to shorten the overall service life of lithium-ion batteries. And these cheap knockoffs likely don't have the conditioning logic built in to help them mitigate capacity degradation over time like these branded batteries typically do. But if you do take some care to not let them cook on the charger or sit at 100% state of charge for days or weeks on end, it's certainly possible that you might actually come out ahead in the long run and save some money with these knockoff batteries. Now, there is one other factor to consider, and that is warranty. The Ryobi battery has a 3-year warranty, provided that you do register it on their website and you upload a receipt. But the knockoff batteries, I have no idea what the warranty is on these things, if there even is one. Amazon basically gives you up to about a month to return them if you have a problem. But beyond that return window, you might be out of luck with some of these knockoff brands. So is it worth rolling the dice to save 50% on these knockoff batteries? Maybe. If you go into it with the understanding that you probably only have about a month of the warranty to protect you if they happen to be delivered dead on arrival. But after that, you're kind of just playing the odds. And if you're okay with that, then yeah, save the money. Now, on the other hand, if spending the extra money isn't that big a deal for you, then you probably just want to stick to the name brands and have the security of that 3-year warranty. Just make sure you do register with those name brand batteries and upload the receipt, or that 3-year warranty isn't going to be worth much. Okay, I hope you found something in the video useful or informative in some way. If you did, please consider clicking on that like button for me. I'd very much appreciate that. And if you like this kind of content, maybe consider subscribing to the channel as well. Either way, I do thank you for joining me on this video, and I do hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.